Sure, sounds great.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the brand building workshop co-organized by IntEnt, the Entrepreneurship Club at BC, and Graduate Marketing Club at Cal School of Management. We are very happy and excited to have you all over here, and we are excited to hear more from Professor Fisher about how how small brands can compete with the big brands, especially in the COVID times. I would quickly hand it over to Katie to share some details about Entrepreneurship Club at BC. Over to you, Katie.
Hi guys, thanks for the quick intro, Shiva. I'm going to share my screen. So just let me know when you're able to see it. Good. So welcome again. IntEnt's really excited to be co-hosting this with the marketing team. And just a quick intro about the IntEnt Club. We are BC's graduate entrepreneurship club. IntEnt is a Boston College organization providing mentorship, experimental learning, and collaborative resources to BC graduate entrepreneurs. Our mission is to develop, train, support, and inspire a community of entrepreneurial leaders grounded by Jesuit principles and dedicated to act ethically and altruistically in the world. So we have kind of 4 branches of the entrepreneur journey, workshops such as this one, where we bring in subject matter experts to begin to educate all of our participants and our members, and especially our entrepreneurs themselves. We have apprenticeship, which connects our members to local small business owners to kind of get real life experience within those startups. Incubator, which creates organizations from scratch, applying hard-earned skills from workshops and apprenticeships. And finally, our accelerator program, which is designed to develop and support a small business idea and get them ready for funding. So really kind of 4 branches of where you are in your entrepreneurship journey, all sorts of types of learning opportunities, and taking those that are entrepreneurs to the next level and getting them ready for the funding. And here's just a quick slide with our contact info if you want to learn more, and we're on LinkedIn, so check us out. Back to you, Shiva.
Thanks, Katie. I'm just trying to share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen now? Yeah, okay, thank you. Alrighty, so we are graduate marketing club, and we basically host various events like networking opportunities. We invite guest speakers that include our own very own professors, our alumni, and the marketing experts. And we also we are trying to get creative in the COVID times, especially to arrange company visits or stuff like that. And we generally collaborate with our alumni, and we had some really wonderful speakers in last semester, and we are trying our best to do the same this semester as well. A good news for especially the first year faces that I'm seeing on the screen is that we are expanding our team and trying to make Graduate Marketing Club more active, more effective, and trying to contribute as positively and constructively as possible to your MBA journey. And we would be super happy to have you participate in the leadership experience, and also in participating in these events. That's me and Dan. We are currently co-presidents of Graduate Marketing Club, and that's Professor Curbs. Most of you have taken his class, and he's our faculty advisor for Marketing Club. Please visit our webpage on bcgma.com. You'll find Marketing Club details over there, and a short form to register with us, or just reach out to Dan or myself. Or we also have our new first year representatives, Connor and Eliza Conrad. So yeah, we would love to have you reach out to us with your questions, concerns, and anything that we can do to support your career and learning in marketing. Thank you so much. Now, I think I'll stop the screen share, and over to you, Professor Fisher.
Thank you very much, Shuba. And just, I think most people know this already, but if you do not and have not met Professor Curbs, he is in my view, the single most outstanding professor for a million reasons at the Carroll School. So he's someone, if you don't know, it would be well worth your time and effort to get to know him. I'm just going to share a screen as well. It'll take me a second just to flip it around a little bit. So let me please, if you'll hold on just a second. And there we go. Okay, so some of you have taken my course, and some of this information may be, in fact, a little bit repetitive. And if that be the case, I certainly apologize to you, but I hope to put some twists in it. And the issue tonight is we at the Carroll School, myself most definitely, and perhaps others, have a tendency to speak about large brands as we try to teach some curriculum and bring to sort of the real world the principles in the scientific developments that we preach in the marketing world. So the tendency, and I fall into the same trap all the time, is to reference the P&Gs, the Ubers, the Googles, the Teslas, and sometimes one forgets that all companies begin small, or some of you may work for startups or small companies, and hence in my course on brand management, I have this course titled Small Brands in a Big Brand World, and I'm reproducing this tonight here for the IntEnt, both groups from BC, the entrepreneurship group as well as the marketing club. And you know, everybody gets 15 seconds worth of fame, or so we're told in this world, and I've already had mine. There's a book published, Story of Nike, and if you, it was written by Julie Strasser, who was she's now the widow, but she was at the time the wife of really the creative marketing genius behind the Nike explosion. And I say the explosion, I mean 1983 and on. Rob Strasser was this gentleman's name, and when he left the company, because somebody as powerful as he and as powerful as Phil Knight, eventually they began to, the gears started to grind a little bit. So he did leave the company after 10 or 12 years there. But his wife wrote this book, and on page 252, when we were having dinner after Rob had left Nike, we were laughing about or commenting about how difficult it was for a small brand, my own in the athletic footwear industry, that I'll introduce to you in a moment, to wake up every morning and have these two hippopotamuses, Nike on one shoulder and Adidas certainly on the other shoulder. And I made the comment that when you guys sneeze, we get pneumonia. And she put it in the book. So that's my 15 seconds worth of fame. And in that regard, I just highlighted in burgundy what I hope qualifies me to lead this discussion beyond my position at Boston College. I spent 34 years in the athletic footwear world, and our brand was Saucony, and I'm proud of our accomplishments, but I'm also realist to use Saucony as an example of how a small brand can coexist or live in a world, athletic footwear and apparel, that is dominated, still is dominated by large, well-capitalized, well-funded brand. And hence, in a sense, if I use a little caricature here, we've got marketing muscle, the big guys, versus marketing opportunity, what we have. Or in a biblical sense, and we do go to a Jesuit college, it's a David versus Goliath situation. And the perspective I'm using, again, as I'm repeating a bit, is athletic footwear to serve as the platform, as the foil to illustrate the point, because as I earlier said, all brands, even Nike, started out as a small brand. Nike began in the back of Phil Knight's blue Volvo. If you look it up on Google, you'll see his blue Volvo, picture of it there somewhere. And he used to ride around to different track meets or collegiate competitions and basically hawk shoes out of the back of his car. He had a better idea. And he too, of course, was a small brand. But in retrospect, his small brandness, through tremendous execution of marketing tools, and I'm sure many of you have studied most or all of these as you've proceeded through your educational career here at BC. Nike was able to consolidate the activities that could propel that brand to what it is today, which is far, far, far and away the number one, the largest, most profitable athletic footwear brand in the world, by far, not even close. So if we take that as sort of an opening, set the stage, if you will, how then can a small brand, regardless of industry, a small brand, actually dare to enter a marketplace where there's brand dominance? And yet we do it, we see it all the time. So from my perspective, this David versus Goliath mentality hinges on 4 elements. Element 1, compete. We have to define that. Element 2, strategy, need to define that. Element 3, tactics, need to define that. And the element 4 is focus. And likewise, we need to define that. But I would ask each of you to keep in mind, not with blinders, but with very specific focus upon, I shouldn't use the word focus, very specific attention upon, this is a sort of a roadmap in a David versus Goliath situation. This isn't necessarily what P&G and Unilever think about every single day. This is really the small brand, the startup brand entering a category or a industry segment that is dominated by larger brands. So if we were in my class, I would now spend a few minutes in having each member of the class try to define the word compete, define the word strategy, define the word tactics, define the word focus. And I've decided not to do that today for a couple of reasons. Number one, some of you have taken the class, and I don't want to be purely repetitive. But the definitions that we might see in dictionary.com, or if any of you still open a dictionary from time to time, they need to be changed in the context of a small brand competing or entering a segment that is dominated by a large brand. So the definitions, they change slightly. Instead of the mano a mano mentality behind compete takes on a somewhat of a different connotation, because compete in a small brand versus big brand world now is more focused on coexistence than winning the war, than fighting mano a mano, A versus B, A versus C. If you can win those battles, eventually you'll move along. That's not the objective in a small brand context. In a small brand context, we're looking to coexist, but coexist doesn't mean to just be in the market. It also requires you running the company or you supporting the brand to be able to coexist while also eliciting a measurable market share, and it's recognized by the participants within the market. And of course, you're in business to make money, so eventually that coexistence has to be linked to a return on capital. Now, I have a lot of words under the word strategy, and if we had time, we would probably all pretty much agree what a strategy is. But the point I'm making here is, if you're a small brand, if it's a David versus Goliath situation, the strategy, which is always important to any business at all, becomes exceedingly important in a small brand context. Why? Primarily because as a small brand, probably undercapitalized, you don't get the second bite or the third bite at the apple if your initial strategy proves to be incorrect. Therefore, I would urge any one of you who are contemplating or find themselves in this small brand marketplace dynamic to spend extra time on this strategy development. You know, a lot of times in a small brand, you go, well, I got to go out and sell my brand or sell my products or sell my service. I won't be around tomorrow. Well, there's some truth to that, except if you want to coexist in a big brand world, your brand identity, your brand statement needs to, as I said in the earlier definition, become measurable by its marketplace constituents. And the way to do that is to develop a strategy that's so well thought through that is appropriate to the marketplace, but is designed to match the long-term horizon that any brand espouses to create. Brands, as we all know, are created for the long run, not for the short term. So the strategy of a small brand, likewise, has to be relatively rigid, relatively firm in its definition and objectives, and designed to carry through to the long run. And importantly, that line about bridge results, both successful and unsuccessful results, as a small brand, under the weight of a big brand, you are going to find yourself in unsuccessful territory at times. That same strategy that brought you to an unsuccessful outcome needs to be as appropriate to that as if your outcomes were positive, of course, which there will be. So a strategy needs to be long-term, resistant to tinkering, and be able to bridge both successful and unsuccessful moments in your brand identity rollout. Tactics for a small brand. I go back to that David versus Goliath little character in the beginning. David slew Goliath with a slingshot, just a little slingshot and a stone. So your tactics need to be extraordinarily focused and accurate, and as opposed to a strategy. Here's where you can have short-term tactics or long-term tactics. They can be fluid, they can be reactive, they can be proactive. They're easy to change. If they don't work, get rid of them, but make sure they complement the strategy. They complement the strategy. So tactics have a connection to that same strategic imperative that you as a small brand leader are going to map out. And then the last one of our definitions, which might be the most similar to the dictionary.com definition, is focus. But the level of focus is almost laser-like, and it requires the small brand to focus. Sorry, I keep using the word focus. To espouse a laser-like concentration. It's almost, if you can imagine, a horse running in the Kentucky Derby. Those thoroughbreds are bred to win races, but some of them have blinders on. And the blinders, of course, are not made to cover their vision, but it's to prevent them from looking from side to side. That's the truth in a small brand versus a big brand world. Laser-like focus on your objective, because if not, just like the horse running down in Louisville, that horse will begin to look left and right and eventually is going to slow down. The horse that wins that race is moving forward. So focus becomes a critical moment in the execution of the attempt for David to coexist in a Goliath world. So what's the rule? The rule is, if you're a small brand in a big brand world, don't battle. Don't go head to head. Don't walk up to Nike in the athletic footwear business and spit in their eye. Don't do it. Stay clear of them. And in staying clear, make sure your strategic and tactical initiatives can be exercised almost free of notice. Because little brands, they don't get a lot of attention. Nike wasn't very concerned about Saucony at all. I was concerned like crazy about Nike, but they were focused on other competitors, large competitors like Adidas and Puma and Reebok at the time. So the staying clear becomes almost the golden rule of a small brand in a big brand world. And that leads me to the Saucony story. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Saucony, Saucony was a fraction of the size of these other brands. The legacy of the company went back to the early 1900s. It went through a number of evolutions, but as it entered the late 70s and 80s, it had become basically a running shoe company. And yet, in and of itself, it found a place in the market by, in essence, staying clear of all the distractions that were in the marketplace. So we could ask oneself, well, did Saucony succeed, or perhaps it didn't? And I'd like to make the case that it did. And I'll go quickly through these slides because I'm already looking at my watch and it's coming up on 6:30. But if you go back to the moment in time when athletic footwear became not the engineering and design and execution of product by a group of highly skilled cobblers, it became a marketing game. And the first to lead the marketing game back in the 70s was Adidas. Adidas and Puma, as some of you may know, were two members of the same family, and they were located in Herzogenaurach, Germany. And they were Hatfields and McCoys. They did not get along, but they built two powerful, powerful businesses. But in the 70s, coming out of the 68 Olympics, the Rome Olympics in 1968, Adidas realized and invented something called the pyramid of influence. And they felt that if they were able to get the best known athletes on the planet to wear Adidas shoes, eventually that pyramid would trickle down to what became the casual users. And hence, in the 70s, Adidas in America, or globally around the world, was far and away, Puma was second, but Adidas was far and away the #1 shoe brand in the globe. So now comes along this kind of renegade guy, sort of West Coast to the max, answers only to the beat of his own drum. And Phil Knight said, no, I'm a small little brand selling shoes out of the back of my car. And I know how important Adidas is, but I don't care. I'm going to go up against them. So what did he do? He actually created a similar product, but he added one thing, as you see highlighted here in burgundy. He put comfort into some of his footwear, which at the time was running shoes. And if anybody goes back and does any research on Adidas running shoes back in the 70s, their big model was something called SL72. And it was a beautiful shoe, highly engineered. But if you went and ran a mile, you felt like you were wearing a brick. But that was the sort of state of the art in that day. Well, Phil Knight came along and he said, no, I'm going to put comfort into these shoes. And he did it in a way that was very appealing to the American runner. And remember, the jogging phenomenon began around the mid to late 70s, early 80s. And he basically copied Adidas's pyramid of influence, but he added one thing to it. And you've all taken marketing courses where you've heard how important brand as personality is. And Nike was able to take the performance engineering that Adidas had pretty much crafted, meld it to the influential endorsement of great athletes, but added an attitude or personality. And that personality shows up when you look at the ad slogans of these two large companies. And we don't have time tonight to play these individual advertisements, but Adidas was so performance driven that their campaigns were based around Horst Dassler's feeling, you don't win silver, you lose gold. And Phil Knight, in many of the same ways, said, hold on a second. Emotion and self-expression are going to be keys to my brand. So I'm going to win plenty of gold. But more importantly, if I don't win gold and you wear Nike, there is no finish line. One of the great advertising slogans of the late 70s, early 80s that really boosted the opportunity that Nike had to actually become, it led them to become a small brand. And in this world of small brands, in particular athletic footwear, there's tons of them. The newest one to the group, and I've been out of the business since 2005, but the newest successful one is Hoka. Sort of that really thick-soled running shoe with a whole different take on comfort. And some of these small brands have become big brands, as New Balance. Anyone who wears New Balance knows that New Balance, and I went to high school with Jim Davis, who's the owner and CEO, and he's been extraordinarily successful. His brand now is in excess of $5 billion a year in revenue. In Saucony's still in the 300, in the United States is around 300 million and about almost 600 million globally. Still a small brand. Nike is in the $30 billion. Enormous, enormous brand. So there's in this slide deck, which Shubha has and will probably post, there's a good number of slides that tells more of the Saucony story, but I'll do it very, very quickly. And then if anybody has questions after this particular club meeting, I'm happy to expound on them. But one of the ways that Saucony was able to coexist was not to go into the athletic footwear industry per se, but to take the largest segment of the industry, which back in the 70s, in the 80s, and definitely by the 90s had moved to the sport of running here in America for sure. Running was the largest segment based on the sporting goods store channels of distribution. And predictably so, the market shares of the leaders back, and this is data that's a little bit old. I don't have any more recent data, but it's relatively similar. Market share in that huge athletic footwear market was pretty large for the top 2 or 3 brands. And there's little Saucony, however you pronounce it. And as anybody, Shubha and Dan have been in my class, they would tell you that I admitted to them and I admit to you, that was a big roundup. The real market share was 2.2 or 2.3, and I was embarrassed to say it was that low and rounded to 2, so I cheated and I rounded it to 3. But if in fact a small brand like Saucony is going to find a place to coexist, how does it do it? It finds a niche. It finds a niche, and Saucony found the niche of running. And what happens in a niche? In a niche, a small brand can drive share of market without a co-equal share of voice. You'll never see, well, you didn't see and you probably won't see Saucony on the Super Bowl, that's for sure. Because at 6 million to 30, that's way out of a small brand's opportunity. But if you can find a niche, and as long as the niche is a real one, it has some scale, it's not a fad, it's populated by knowledgeable customers. And if anybody has ever gone to a running shop and listened to the conversations at a specialty run shop, you know that these consumers are pretty knowledgeable. You, meaning the brand, can find its place to coexist and coexist carefully. There is a trap called the niche trap, but I'm not going to focus on that at this particular moment. So Saucony found a niche. Running was exploding in the United States. This is a lot of demographics about the running game. And I think in 2018, 750,000 finishers of marathons in the US registered. And for the 2019 Boston Marathon, there were 34,000+ entrants. So it's a big, big niche. And as I said, a niche is important because if share of voice is supposedly equal to share of market, or at least that's a model in the marketing textbooks, you look at Nike, you look at Adidas, and you can see that their place between ad spend and market share is relatively on that 45-degree line. Although you look at Saucony, its share of market is way beyond. It's way beyond its share of voice for sure. And then you have an outlier like Reebok, which is way on the right. Here's a company that, as I said earlier, had strategies, and they had enough capital, enough money to constantly be changing their strategy. Eventually, people didn't understand what they meant, their brand identity meant. They kept spending and spending and spending and spending. Their market share never rose. And as some of you may know, Adidas bought them in 2006 for $1.3 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, except they were, in the early 80s, the #1 athletic shoe brand in the marketplace. So without spending too much time, when you find that niche, you've got to find a distribution channel that features that niche. And we have Marathon Sports here in Boston. They have 11 stores in the greater New England area. You may have visited one. So you start to look at what their segment of that multiple billions of dollars of athletic shoes was. And in the fall of 18, the running shoe specialty segment registered just under $4 billion. The brand share, the number one brand share in sports specialty was not Nike, was not Adidas, was not New Balance, was not any of the big boys. It was a real small company called Brooks. But look at the share they had. It's almost matched by the same share that Nike has at 34% in the overall market. And I'm very proud to tell you, and I had left the company by then, so I have nothing to do with it, but Saucony actually had, from a 2.23 overall percentage of athletic footwear, they had the number 2 share at run specialty of 19.4, followed by ASICS, and then a whole host of other brands, including Nike at number 4. 4. So obviously some of these small brands were able to satisfactorily compete in a big brand world. And I bring up this particular photograph because some of you may remember the Vibram shoes. They had a theory that footwear doesn't need all the cushioning. We were meant to run in bare feet, so they replicated the barefoot runner. They introduced their shoes. They actually grew their business to close to 4% in the first 18 or 24 months. But by 2018, you go in a running shop, you go to Marathon Sports today, you certainly won't find a pair. So in a conclusion type commentary, we look at the overall brand share, again, fudged up to 3%, against the specialty run channel, not fudged at all, at 19.4%. And in a way, it speaks to the ability, if you follow those 4 sort of benchmark guidelines, redefine, compete, redefine or underscore the definition of strategy, be fluid and adaptable with tactics, and then put on those blinders, focus like crazy, you can develop a successful rollout of your company. I'm going to skip the next couple of slides, Shuba. You can post them. It has to do with the niche trap. But I want to make sure that we get to the other side of the coin. What can a big brand do? What can a big brand do? Well, they can keep these kind of blinders on, or they can wake up and sort of smell the roses and say, how did I let that happen? How did I let Brooks? How did I let Saucony? How did I let these small companies, Hoka today? What can I do to dissuade them? Well, it really lies in the capital structure that these larger companies have. And what they want to do is create distractions so that the small brand violates one of its 4 parameters. And that 4th parameter, which is so critical, is focus. And in my class, I use sort of the analogy of the Medusa impact. Greek mythology, Medusa was this powerful vixen, and if soldiers were to look at her, they turned to stone. Well, what are the Medusa impact in a small brand versus big brand world? The big brand wants to create enough distractions to take you off strategy. And so the small brand tends to lose its strategic adherence. Its tactics become sort of free for all, and they lose focus on where they're going. And eventually they diminish their brand equity. There are other weapons that the big brand can do. They can outspend them. They can buy them. They can cause financial difficulties for that small brand. But if the small brand is keen in their sense of adhering to those 4 doctrines of success, there's an opportunity for coexistence. And here's a good example. Converse is a brand we all know of. Back when I was in high school and college, which seems like 100 years ago, they absolutely owned the basketball shoe business. Whether you were playing after school, you were playing on a team, you were a professional, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, if you were a player, you wore Converse. And along came Nike and did the same thing that in basketball that they did in running. And what they, in a sense, did is they forced Converse not to focus on its niche, which they absolutely owned for decades. They caused Converse to look outside of their niche. And what did Converse do? They decided, oh, no, we own basketball. We're going to play Nike ball. We don't have Michael Jordan, so we'll sign his teammate. We'll become the official shoe of the LA Olympics. We'll buy an apparel company. We'll spend. We'll put shoes on football, NFL, and Major League Baseball players. And I love the one about the official shoe of the LA Olympics, because if you did some research, or if you had a family member, older member of your family who attended the LA Olympics, and asked them how many athletes at the LA Olympics wore Converse shoes, the answer was zero. Zero. The only people that wore Converse shoes at the LA Olympics were the ticket takers, the ushers, and the souvenir sellers. It was a complete waste of money. And what happened to Converse, we probably all know. They filed for bankruptcy in the mid to late 1990s. They went bankrupt. And then what happened a few years later? Some of you may know this as well. Oops, for some reason that's not, there we go. Wall Street Journal in July 9th of 2003 says Nike to buy Converse for about $305 million. A pittance to Nike. So the Goliath swallowed up Chuck Taylor. And this is a quote direct from Wall Street Journal, which I think is an important one. The Wall Street Journal said, in a deal with cultural significance, that's how important a brand Converse was, that far outweighs its monetary value. Nike, which at that time was $10 billion, pays roughly $305 million to the near 100-year-old footwear company, and in doing so bought a company who had become a low-tech provider of athletic footwear. And today, interestingly enough, that low-tech shoe, which is a fashionable shoe, and there isn't a young woman going to college in America, anywhere in the globe, who doesn't have at least one pair of Chuck Taylor fashion sneakers made out of canvas. And that's why registered, it was estimated in fiscal year 19 in the Nike annual report that you backed into Converse sales about almost $3 billion. $3 billion. Bought them for $300 million, and you come 15, 16 years later, and that $300 million investment turned into almost $3 billion. So in conclusion, and then I'm happy to answer any kind of questions or comments, can a small brand compete in a big brand world? Yes, if you redefine competition, strategy, tactics, and adhere to focus. Mind, you need to have some unique product or service or delivery. It can't be me too. It can't be a me too situation and expect to coexist, because why would anybody buy me too from anyone but the market leader? Find a niche and then cater to it. Avoid distractions. Be disciplined and almost religious to stay on strategy. Maintain your brand identity and protect it. Anybody who's taken my class has seen my metaphor with white gloves. Keep your brand as if you were holding it in white gloves. Do not get it stained. And then the interesting piece is you have to recognize exit realities. And I don't mean exit saying go out of business. Exit is going to either you leave the designation of a small brand because you're now entering a new phase. You raise capital in some way, whether it's public or you take investors. You have to change your perception of who you are. Or, as in the case of Saucony, our exit reality became that we had mined the niche as deeply as we possibly could, and we found a suitor with a much larger bag of coins that could promote the brand and spend many, many, many more share of voice dollars and help drive share of market. So to succeed as a small brand, it doesn't have to be predominant in your mind, but the exit strategy needs to be part of that strategic decision you and your marketing group at the beginning. When you get to a strategy that works, say one more thing. What's our exit plan? Now, exit plans can change, but what's our exit plan? And I think if you follow somewhat of that menu, you can successfully navigate the path of a smaller brand in a big brand world. And I end by the reality that I began with, where I say all Goliaths were once Davids, and yet, while exit realities are important, there are companies that basically say, you've just listened to Fisher for 40 minutes, forget everything he said. We're in the athletic footwear business. We didn't coexist. We spit in Nike's eye. And many of you, if we had the time, I'd ask you who it was, and somebody would raise their hand and certainly say, well, they're the school, they're the brand that our college supports and promotes in all of our athletic endeavors. Who is that brand? It's Under Armour. Under Armour basically took everything we've just spoken about in the last 40 or so minutes and said, not doing it. And they spit in their eye, and they actually won. Now, that only underscores the statement I make at the beginning of every class. Marketing is a treadmill. Once you step onto that treadmill, there is no straight path that you can be guaranteed of the correctness or incorrectness of a decision you make. It's dynamic, it moves, it has interpretive approaches that are consistently in play. And that's what I think makes marketing as a career professional something that is so exciting, because today's leaders, or I should say tomorrow's leaders in a world dominated by brands, you guys, for instance, is the chief marketing officer. Forget the CEO. Yeah, you'll go to the Kentucky Derby, you'll play golf at Pebble Beach, but the real power is in the chief marketing officer. And it's something that each and every one of you who are studying the profession of marketing should keep in mind. And all that is as successful as Under Armour has been, they had a bad year in 19. Their revenues were down 25%, and they lost a boatload of money. But they have emerged from this little tiny sort of scratch on Nike's shoulder into what today becomes a major player in athletic footwear and apparel. So I would end by using the slide I used at the end of my class, and Shubha and Dan have both seen this, and I would offer to everyone in both of these organizations, you're studying at a great school, at a great brand, and when you graduate, go out and take a risk. You know, you're not studying to line up and be lemmings. Go out and take a risk. And President Goheen from Princeton University basically said the same thing 10 or 12 years ago at commencement. He said, if you feel you have both feet planted on solid ground, then your educational experience has failed you. So go take risks. You guys are really smart, a lot smarter than I was a long time ago when I was sitting in your shoes. So I thank you for your attention, but I urge each one of you to wash, mask, and distance. We're almost there. Let's get out of this mess and all get together and have drinks one of these days together. Thank you very much, Shubha. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'll switch it back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Can we all please unmute for a moment and give a big round of applause to Professor Fisher?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anybody who has any questions, I'd be happy to. We've got a few more minutes, I think, and I'd be happy to answer some questions. Go ahead, Dan, ask me something. I know you, so I can, I'll pick on you.
I'm percolating. Give me a minute or two and I'll have one.
I have a question, Professor.
Yeah, sure, Ed, go ahead.
Exit strategy. Can you talk about just the exit strategy in general if you're a small brand and you're starting up and you've got big ideas and you're thinking, all right, I'm just going to put let's say $10 billion is my exit strategy. Like, if you work your way up there, is that the kind of exit strategy you're looking at, or are you thinking of something?
No. I'll a little bit tongue-in-cheek answer, Ed, but we've all watched the Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And we've all seen Kevin Foley react to small brands and companies. And he always, before he calls the members of the pitch team cockroaches, he always say, you're a hobby. You don't have yet any benchmarks that you can stand upon, so your valuation is nuts.
Right.
So I guess, Ed, my answer would be in the Kevin Foley speak. If you are a startup, the exit strategy assumes a lengthy and long process of success. And just to know when you got to a certain point, you're not going to be small anymore. And then you're going to have to figure out how to recapitalize, even if that means selling. But recapitalization is going to happen if a small brand becomes a medium brand. You know, Saucony never became a medium brand. New Balance did. And they've grown, as I said, to $5 billion. And they had a major recapitalization in the late 90s where they actually sold 25% of their business to one of their Asian suppliers for an enormous amount of money, but it freed up all that working capital. So that to me was an exit reality without a sale or an acquisition.
Thank you.
Sure. Got Eliza.
I was a runner in high school and college. So when you,
Right.
but I didn't come from a family of runners. My parents threw me in a pair of really crappy Nikes, and then I injured myself as a middle schooler. So for me, going to like marathon sports and getting fitted for a proper shoe, they
Right.
lined up all the shoes. It was a New Balance. They gave me an Asics, a Saucony, and a Nike, and they just said, let's run in the mall and see. It was
Right.
super equitable. And I didn't really think about how that specific niche store really is the reason that a small brand like Saucony or Asics, which I ran in for 15 years, basically, is really, really just creates like a small niche community that really, it gets behind your product.
Sure.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's okay. Well, because New Balance I feel like in addition to just growing into a medium athletic footwear brand, they they had a resurgence in the last couple of years through like the vintage-esque trend going on, and they just really ran with that. So do you think that Saucony maybe had an opportunity somewhere in there that maybe they could have moved into the medium brand via a different athletic footwear or different type of trend that came along? Or do you think that they're still really playing well where they're sitting now?
I have an experiential answer for that question. And when New Balance began selling its retro product in large numbers, we said, well, why don't we take the Saucony Jazz, which was the first shoe I didn't design it. I approved the design. I can't draw. But it was the first major shoe that we offered to the marketplace because it had a technological outer sole called the triangular stud that was built to absorb shock when you landed on your heel and then power you off in the forefoot. Long story short, today you still see the triangular lug pattern on Saucony shoes. But come along 1993, 4, 5, something like that. If New Balance was being successful, why don't we bring the Saucony Jazz back? Which we did. And we brought the Jazz back, and all of a sudden stores in the inner city, fashion stores began to buy these things in huge quantities, huge. So as CEO of a public company, instead of scraping out, meeting the marketplace's expectation for sales and revenue and margin so our share price wouldn't suffer, all of a sudden our sales went way up. And one day, Colin Petty, who owns the store where you go to, called me up from Brookline and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm not sure. He said, meet me at the, what was it called? The Beacon Street Deli or some deli right across the street from his store. And he brings me in and he says, you know, you're crazy. We, the sports specialty run channel around the country, have supported this brand. And what have you been doing the last 8 to 12 months? You're selling shoes hand over fist to Foot Locker. You don't love us anymore. And he shook me into reality, and I forgot how important distribution partner is to a small brand. So we didn't shut off the fashion shoes, but we redirected, we repointed the boat back to our safe harbor, which was sports specialty. So you're only speaking to the necessity of a small brand finding that distribution segment partner that can exercise and give you a platform, as you saw when you went into that store, where Saucony had a chance to compete for your foot on its own merit, not because of its color, not because of its big ad in the Super Bowl, not because it had really nice looking running clothing. You wanted a shoe that would fit you and keep your feet, keep your body in relative good shape. So that's a true story.
Thank you. That's super interesting.
Dan.
I had a question about share of voice, which I know you said not to emphasize, but an example I thought of was when I worked in golf and was trying to gin up excitement for an LPGA event in Chicago. And unfortunately, the LPGA doesn't have the natural kind of sway and notoriety that a PGA Tour event would have. And in a market like Chicago, where there's other events going on and things for people to do, it was really hard to get people interested and buy tickets. And I'm kind of equating that to a small brand in a big brand world.
It is.
We always tried to focus on our core audience. Similarly, it was big with families and real golf fans. And we tried to target them digitally and find promotions that they'd be interested in. And it never really clicked. So I'm curious if you have methods for a small brand that would work for gaining share of voice and maybe just the little bit that you would want. Not that you're competing with a big brand, but just enough to get yourself out there.
Well, if you use professional golf as an example, and that was your question, I think LPGA is the small brand operating in a big brand world of professional sports entertainment, not just golf, but in entertainment. And I actually think, Dan, not to debate with you, but I think LPGA has done a fabulous job in the last few years of bringing its competitive interest to men and women, young and old, and around the world. And I think because of the emergence of players from Asia who are, this is an Asian trend of dominance, it's brought a lot of notoriety to the game, creating share of voice. And I know that the number of young women who now think of golf as an opportunity is far greater than, say, 5, 7, 10 years ago. So I don't know if that answers your question. I actually think they've done it, and I don't think it's easy. And I think you experienced the difficulty, but I think they've taken women's sports and said, okay, it's big. We want a piece of it. And I think from my own place where I play golf, there's a lot of women whose parents say, my daughter keeps playing like this, she'll go to college on a scholarship. And that's a win.
That's for sure true. And I think maybe there's a distraction you're talking about where you're trying to, get fans that are not part of your core audience. And,
right.
When you start to lose the focus, that's when you might start to slip up. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jordan
Spieth, Tiger Woods, and Brooks Koepka, if you have $60 to spend on a ticket, are you going to go there, or are you going to go in Chicago to see the LPGA event? Now, take an LPGA event and put it somewhere else, and you might find people going to see Supak Kim and all of the great women golfers, young women golfers that are emerging. Thank you, though.
I think Rose and Jessica have questions.
Okay.
Hi,
sure, Rose. Hi, Rose.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation, John. So one question I had was, what do you think the impact of both the internet and then kind of D2C resulting from the internet has had on the ability of brands to kind of shake up the competitive landscape? So you showed kind of the market share of the various companies, and it was pretty concentrated amongst a few of them. And for example, I think of Allbirds, which is predominantly D2C, and it kind of snuck up in there. But then at the same time, as a counterfactor, you have Nike, which has changed their strategy and they closed down some of their retail partnerships. And so kind of how do we think about those two different factors?
Okay, I think there's two things working there, but let me go to what I didn't cover, and that is the COVID reality. COVID has forced every one of us into the internet world. And if you weren't an internet shopper, you've become one. I have Instacart deliver groceries. A year and a half ago, I would never not go to Wegmans or to Whole Foods, but now Instacart takes care of it. So I think we found that the COVID reality has pushed people into the internet shopping world, and the impact of that, you guys will navigate the impact of that, because I don't think we know it yet, but it's significant and it's real. So a small brand actually has a more level playing field on the thing called Web 2.0 than it certainly does buying pages in Sports Illustrated, the Super Bowl. I'm again talking athletic footwear, whether it's Cosmopolitan magazine, whatever your magazine, whatever your TV, whatever your radio, whatever your billboard, it's all been leveled. So how does a small brand take advantage of that leveling? By honing and shining each of those definitions: compete, strategy, tactics, and focus. That's a lousy answer, but I think it's an answer that I couldn't give you because it's out there. It's not years out, but it's going to evolve, and you as a marketing professional are going to have to balance it yourself. But there's a better opportunity for small brands because of the leveling of the field.
Thank you. That's all.
You bet. You bet.
Thank you, Professor, for all your answers.
Thank you. Thank
about
you.
Branding and existential crisis that some small brands feel they're facing during COVID and stuff. So thank you for answering all those. Thank you for inspiring us. And
I
thank
hope
you
so. Because you guys are the future, you know. One of you will be sitting where I am speaking to a group of marketing students 20 years, not even that long, 15 years from now. So do a good job, will you please? I'm going to have grandchildren that depend on you. All right. Thank you, Ed. Dan, nice to see you. All you guys who I haven't met, really nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
We'll see you on campus, I hope. Safe, be safe.
I'm going to take you up on that drink, sir.
I'm offering.
Me
All
too.
right.
Gonna have a big party one of these days. I've already told Dan's class and Shuba, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna have a couple hundred people. We're going to a gin mill and the bar's open.
You're gonna have to rent a place out at this rate, I think.
It's okay. It's
You
okay.
might
It'll be
be-
worth it. It'll
Yeah.
be worth it. All right. Good luck, guys. Good
All right,
night.
thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.